Good. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. Jeff, could you call the roll, please?
Yeah. Joy Andrade.
Here.
Alicia Branham is excused. Chris Clark.
Here.
Bruce Davis.
Present.
Diane is on her way. Janice is excused. John Parker is excused. Kathy Plowman is excused. Bo Revlett.
Here.
Liz Sheehan.
Here.
Renee Shepard.
Here.
And Lois Still.
Here.
And Adrian Wallace. All right.
Ready? Great. Looks like we've got a quorum to proceed. First item, well, it's actually the third item on the agenda. Hopefully everybody received the email packet that Jeff sent out last Wednesday, I believe it was. First item, item number 3, is the minutes of the November 9, 2022 meeting. They're rather lengthy. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to look at them.
I know you had one correction
Right.
at least.
Yeah, there's one correction. Did anybody else see anything to be corrected before we ask for motion?
And that correction was the meeting location.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear. Other corrections for the minutes?
Okay. Then, if I could get a motion to approve the minutes of the November 9 meeting that would also include amending the location of the meeting, which was held at the north side branch of the Lexington Public Library on Russell Cave Road rather than in this room.
So moved.
Renee moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Joy, second. Thank you. Any discussion on the approving the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Public and partner comments for issues on the agenda. Any items anybody wants to address or mention for items that are on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to item 5, onboarding curriculum for case manager update.
Come on up.
Meredith isn't here yet. Is that okay?
I'm sorry?
We're meeting on Meredith.
Okay.
Want to pass that temporarily?
We can. We'll go ahead then and move down to the Data and Systems Integration Committee report.
Marissa.
So that's going to be Marissa, since we presently need to establish a new chair for that committee.
Thank you. So on December 7th, we met at the East Vine Street 3rd floor conference room. Let's see. Jeff Herron, I was present, Jackie Long, Mackenzie Willoughby, Dan Fleet, David Chad, and Alicia Burrs, along with Liz Sheehan. We discussed new business, which was the HMIS data quality plan, which our board member Diane Fleet made the motion and Liz Sheehan, council member Sheehan, seconded. There was no further discussion and it passed unanimously. We also discussed continuing business, including but not limited to returns to homelessness review, programs and systems, performance benchmarks and strategies to help support the PPE committee. We wanted to have this to present. That way, both board members as well as individuals who are attending that committee would have a guide of what we need presented, as well as to have greater comparison, better ideas of identifying challenges and struggles, and hopefully being able to work with providers to make sure that they get what they need from HMIS and have accurate data. We also discussed within the annual CLC process the benchmarks and the points that are awarded for strategies in each of those areas, and discussed how to better serve coming together as a body and a subcommittee work group to meet our performance targets. We also discussed housing triage policies and procedures. That way they can move forward. We also discussed working with untold content about that document and the struggles of getting individuals document ready. We also touched on very briefly how KHC has different levels within their coordinated entry project pertaining to their find name list when individuals are document ready. That way is a way to expedite that process and also determine who exactly is available when those referrals do come up. And we also discussed our housing triage by name list meetings. That is to be established on the second Thursday. Second Thursday at 2. That will be in via Zoom, not in person. So if you need that Zoom link, please let us know. And we also discussed our resource guide updates, which was originally established by the Lexington Rescue Mission and then continued by New Vista, and that we are working to improve that resource.
So we will need a vote on the HMIS data quality plan. Regarding the HMIS data quality plan, we will have one correction that will need to be made. Our vendor just rolled out a new version of reports. So on pages 2 and 8, you will find reference to the COC APR 2022 report and the ESG CAPR 2022 report. Those have now been updated with 2023 versions. So whenever we get a motion, we would need it to include that amendment.
Okay. Pages 2 and 8.
Correct.
Is there any questions of, may I ask Marissa, sorry, if anybody has any questions of you regarding the flow, or Jeff? Any questions of Marissa or Jeff regarding the proposed data quality plan or updated plan? Not, could I get a motion to approve, noting, amending items on page 2 and page 8?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Motion's been made. I don't, it's from a committee, doesn't it, secretary? Okay, motion's on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Could I call for the question, please? All those in favor could just signify by raising your right hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the data quality plan? Seeing no opposition, I say it's approved. Marissa, thank you. Liz, can we go to your report, I guess, the Program Performance Evaluation Committee?
Yes. So we met on December 14th, and one of the things we discussed, as Marissa talked about, and let the room know that Jeff and I were working on instructions for presenters to kind of set a standard for the presentations that occur in the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee, so that you have a little bit of structure, and then it helps kind of give a timeline for when you do need something from their office, you need to request it by a certain date. So expect something from one of us pretty soon if you're one of those presenters, to have a little bit of guidance on what we will be looking for in those presentations. We also had the typical presentations. So we had Arbor Youth Services present for their emergency shelter program that's funded through ESR for 18 to 24-year-olds. They gave a summary of their program. Some of the challenges and barriers that we discussed were things like refusing mental health assistance or services, some challenges finding housing for clients, and some other related work. Then we had a presentation from Community Action Council on their rapid rehousing program. That's the Emergency Solutions Grant. Some of the discussion around that was there weren't any statistics of any people from the Hispanic population served, so we talked about that. We talked about exits to permanent housing and employment and income growth for the people who are stayers versus leavers in the program. And then we had Community Action Council again for their crisis and housing support for youth. That's a continuum of care program. This is a joint project with Arbor Youth. And we talked about some of the challenges there too, like the wait that they're experiencing for apartment complexes is like 1 to 2 months to even get people into a space. Whether or not it was harder to find housing for this particular age group, and then some of the turnover and maintenance for transitional housing units. So overall, good discussion. We did have Salvation Army for their emergency shelter program. That's an ESR program scheduled, but they were not in attendance. Have you been able to hear back from them to reschedule?
I'm working on getting them rescheduled.
Okay.
They would have fallen under the new calendar in June. I'm trying to reschedule that a little bit sooner.
Okay. So our next meeting is February 15th at 1:30, and that's going to be at 298 West Loudon Avenue. But we also have one motion that we need to make from this committee. We did look at the 2023 evaluation calendar. That is on page 18 of your packet for today, if you want to view that. But we need to vote on that for approval. So I'll make that motion coming from the committee. The committee approved it to come to the full board.
Thank you, Liz. Any questions of Liz before we vote on this? As she mentioned, this was emailed out in the packet. The evaluation calendar for 2023. Motion's on the floor. Could I get if there's no further questions, could I get a vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your right hand again. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Sounds like it's unanimous. Liz, anything else in your report?
That's all for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to, I guess, the Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee report. Jeff?
So in the Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee, we had some discussion around the Lex count. We pushed that to this committee. We had been waiting on some finalized guidance from HUD in order to finalize our methodology document. Normally it would be in the Data and Systems Integration Committee. The committee did vote on that document and approved it, so it would have a motion coming to the board. We can take a vote on that in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of finish the report out. The other significant thing that we engaged in was going to be our discussion around the fiscal year 24 Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund. I know that not all of our board members were in attendance, so I also wanted to just make sure that you guys had some more detailed information around what we discussed in that meeting. I had shared in that agenda packet and reported out some of the ideals for potential funding priorities that have been expressed to me from board members and membership. We also spent a little bit more time talking about ideals that might not have been on that list. So hopefully some of the board members today can give a little bit of additional input if there are items that they would want us to prioritize so that we can work to draft and issue RFPs and get some programs under contract for fiscal year 24. Out of the list, some of the things that I'm going to kind of highlight, we probably need to think about continued funding for street outreach. The COC under the Continuum of Care Program Supplemental NOFO did apply for both Community Action Council and Hope Center street outreach teams to receive potential funding. However, we should be conscious of the fact that due to the scoring criteria, we automatically as a community lose out on 30 points by not having more than 1,000 individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So that means that we're kind of in a precarious position where we should not anticipate definitely that we are going to receive that funding. It's a possibility, but it's going to really come down to the scoring criteria. So it may be wise for us to potentially think about using some of our funds to continue to fund street outreach, or we'd be looking at a major system gap. I would urge us, if we do want to make that a priority, to continue to push that model forward so it meets the spirit of being innovative and not being sustainability funding. other options of things that we could choose to prioritize. We continue to see a lot of individuals that have some barriers to accessing our congregate shelters. That's something that we especially see during the winter time, but also keep in mind that preliminary findings from our racial equity analysis have suggested that our shelters are found to be medium to high barrier. So looking for potentially some interim housing that would be low barrier, but also meet the needs of individuals like those that would be couples, those that would have mobility issues, which would prevent them from staying within some of the congregate shelters. We do have a transitional housing program targeted at individuals with pets, but we continue to see that as something that's sometimes a more emergent need. So we may potentially want to consider some funding of interim housing. Under our strategic plan, there had also been the recommendation that we establish an eviction, diversion, and mediation pilot program. That is something that I'm going to continue to explore if potentially housing stabilization funding might be able to help us support. We'll be meeting with Jonathan Wright, the director of that program, soon. We unfortunately had to reschedule our December meeting. If we do not have any funding that would be available from another source, we probably need to look at trying to get that implemented to be in alignment with our strategic plan. There's also been a lot of interest in having programs that would do things kind of like transitional case management, where there would be a case manager who can help follow individuals that are exiting institutional settings. We've had a lot of partners express concern about individuals coming from settings like Eastern State Hospital or our other hospitals, also settings like sober living, to where those individuals are sometimes transported right back to the locations where they used to buy and use, and without some kind of permanent housing for them to go into, that's become a barrier. So this would be something that would potentially allow us to have some targeted case management. Even if we're not able to immediately resolve that individual's permanent housing need, we can at least be utilizing the time that they're in those institutions prior to exit for a better transition. Other ideals that would include things that were in our strategic plan. A permanent housing expansion pilot program could be a potential priority. Under the two previous COC NOFOs, there have been opportunities to apply for programs that would leverage healthcare and housing resources. Unfortunately, the conundrum that we usually find ourselves in when those NOFOs are released is that we are dealing with a timeline of 1 to maybe 2 months, and that's usually a difficult time frame to work on the partnerships and develop a kind of program description in an adequate time. So this would be something that we could potentially fund out of Innovative and Sustainable to pilot and get some data on outcomes, and then we'd already have some of the partnerships in place to pursue other funding sources. I would recommend that that would be something that should focus on individuals that, for example, would have co-occurring disorders, with a heavy emphasis on our hospitals and our healthcare providers, and also be something that would be flexible enough to meet the needs of those who have a clear and urgent need for housing, but may not clearly be quickly served through HUD-funded programs. We also discussed some information that we've received recently on state IDs, and there is a pathway for us to reestablish our ID program. The main challenge that we've run into is that the state really is looking for us to have one point of contact rather than working with multiple agencies, and they also desire having an agency that can provide a credit card for those IDs to be charged to. LFUCG purchasing policies are not a great fit for us being able to do that, so it would be a very easy program to implement if we would have an agency that wanted to apply to be the point of contact and help facilitate individuals getting access to those IDs. We also have the option of a third year with Welcome House for their payee program that's currently allocated in our fiscal year 24 budget. They presented an update on their program in the advocacy committee. They got started during COVID, had somewhat of a slow start, but now the numbers that they're serving have them on track for spending the year 2 amount. There was some discussion that Community and Resident Services has a payee program that could potentially be used in lieu of this program. I've had some conversations with Welcome House. They're working on getting us some information to kind of help us understand if we did not fund the third year, how that would impact things and what that looks like for the continuity of care for those that would need to transition to Community and Resident Services program. At the current time, just with the limited amount of time that they would have to make a transition, and based on some information like the fact that their program has the ability to put participant funds on a debit card for easier access to their money, my recommendation would be that we would move forward with the amount that we've already blocked out for fiscal year 24 and look to make any changes after that third year. We'd also discussed potentially using some funds for a match for an HMIS system administrator position. We applied under the most recent COC NOFO and should hopefully hear in the coming months if that is awarded. We've also had some ongoing discussions for the past year or so around something from our strategic plan, which would be a resource development officer position to be created to try to raise funds for the Lexington Homelessness Fund. And I also mentioned that we're going to need to order some additional signage to address panhandling, which was previously funded out of Innovative and Sustainable Solutions. I'll be transparent that the membership did not respond incredibly well to us using Innovative and Sustainable Solutions funds for that purpose. I'm glad to explore other avenues for that. But again, just wanted to try to engage the full board in some discussion around this. If you all have any thoughts, I also circulated an email to the board members this morning so that they kind of have the current balance of what is left to be allocated out of 24 and some of the follow-up information from Welcome House. Would there be any thoughts or discussion around what you'd like to see us prioritize for the next fiscal year? Not everyone at once.
I don't really have thoughts or
Go ahead,
ideas.
excuse me. Sorry, go ahead, excuse me.
I don't really have thoughts or ideas, I just had sort of a question. So it's regarding the state ID, is there a way just to go ahead and like pre-fund so many and give it directly to that office? And so there's just a bank of money to come out rather than a nonprofit or an agency holding that and paying as it goes and having to worry with that credit card? Like, can we front fund it?
So my understanding from the meeting that I had with them is they are really looking to have that credit card on file and just charge them as they are issued. With the county clerk's office, we had the ability to do that, to go ahead and do an amount of funding, and they would just keep a running tally of those cases and periodically give us updated information so we knew kind of what our balance was, what we were spending. The state is not looking to do anything like that. They are pretty adamant on wanting to have a credit card on file and just charge them as they come in. Which is why I'm looking to see if maybe we have a partner who's purchasing policies that would agree with more so than it would with LPCGs.
Jeff, on the Welcome House business, there's no action to take today.
I mean, we may want to go ahead and have a vote on it. I think to give them fair time, we probably should go ahead and at least establish that.
Is there any further questions of Jeff regarding the Welcome House program? At the last committee meeting, we had the opportunity to ask them and grill them with several questions. And basically, I was concerned that
I think it would be a good deal for us to go ahead and vote on whether we want to give them that third-year option so that there's adequate time for them to plan, and if people are going to transition to Danielle's office, for her to plan. That is something that I think we should move forward on for sure.
Are there any other questions regarding the Welcome House program? I'm in favor of it being given a third year, even with a lot of questions still. I think even if it could be changed to the other agency, I think there'd be problems, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I'm working on getting a firm number from them in terms of those that would have established case management from other providers. I think Community and Resident Services is going to have a larger challenge being able to immediately take on their current 18 clients if they don't have the case management from other sources. And again, I also think it's a benefit to the clients that they would presently, through Welcome Houses program, receive their funds on a debit card. I believe that Community and Resident Services is still using checks, which I think the debit card just kind of further reduces some barriers that our population would have. So I think given those factors, it would probably be best for us to go ahead and give that additional time so that we can make a more firm plan for the future.
Could I get a motion
Can
for...
I ask you a question, Bruce?
Yeah, excuse
Yeah.
me. Go ahead, excuse me.
Because I know, Danielle, you're here, and I think in the email you said that y'all had conversations since. So I was just curious if we could hear from Danielle on your thoughts, given.
I think Jeff's plan is good for this next year, because I think the transition will be too fast. We do have a meeting set up next week to find out if we can use the debit cards, but I think, like you said, with the population that's being served, the debit cards are definitely an asset as opposed to how we check. So
Gotcha.
I think this plan is good.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Could I get a motion for approval of a third year for the payee program operated by Welcome House?
So moved.
Liz has made the motion. Second. Chris made the second. Is there further discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your right hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Looks like it passes unanimously.
All right, and then do y'all have any thoughts about what you as a board would like to prioritize with remaining funds?
Well, I think you have to wait until you know if you have funding for street outreach, because if you don't get that funding for street outreach, I would think you would want to make sure you have some funding. So I would suggest we not.
So my only hesitation with that is not knowing when we will hear from HUD regarding the supplemental NOFO. Typically, it can be anywhere from late January on the annual COC competition to like March. And given the length of time that it would take to go through an RFP process, I would have to work with purchasing to draft and put all that together. Typically, once it's released, it's going to be at least probably a 45-day process, would you say, Charlie? So my concern is, if we were to wait to make our decisions that far out, I'm probably not going to be issuing RFPs in time to have things under contract for July 1.
And where would you get the money?
I think if we want to make sure that we have street outreach, we would probably be best served by dedicating some of the funding now, and then if it's not used, we could come back and vote to use it for another purpose.
All the feeling that I'm getting about it is that it's probably we're not going to get the funding.
It's going to be a tough competition, and there's going to be communities that far exceed our number of unsheltered homelessness that are automatically going to have an edge. So then it's going to come down to other scoring criteria, and since this is the first of its kind NOFO, I don't have any previous years that I can look back to say how we have been evaluated or performed with respect to that competition.
Yeah, because I mean, I agree. I think even though I'm in street outreach, I mean, I think that, losing that component to what we do here, I don't know if that would be a big gap to try to overcome.
It would be a large gap. So we would have Lexington Rescue Missions team would still have funding. They are currently on ESGCP, which will come to an end this calendar year, but then they have some additional funding through Extended Social Resource. Presently, we're operating 3 teams, and I feel like even amongst those 3 teams, we probably could use additional resources to meet that need. So I would be really alarmed about having a potential system gap that large.
How much of the 600,000 do we think we would need to reserve for it?
I'm sorry?
How much of the 600,000 remaining would we need to reserve for it?
So right now, the only things that we have allocated is the match for the continuum of care coordinator position, and we just voted on welcome houses. So the number that I gave to the board included welcome house, so that 617,806 would be the amount remaining after those 2 programs.
Yeah. And like, what would the need be for street outreach? Like, how much money do we think we should?
So to give you a sense, on fiscal year 22, we funded Community Action Council Street Outreach Team at $259,000, and in fiscal year 23, there was an additional $134,000. So we would probably be looking to fully fund a team, probably be looking at something closer to the $259,000 annual amount. The $134 is kind of more of like a closeout amount. It's not necessarily going to be something that would be adequate to fully fund a team. So I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $250,000 probably.
Did you say it was for fiscal year 22?
Yeah, it was kind of convoluted because it was originally funded out of Innovative and Sustainable, then that rolled onto ARPA, which extended the agreement. So the way that we did it is it was set up as kind of grants through ARPA funding, and there was part of the funding on fiscal year 22, part on fiscal year 23, even though not all, we're still closing out the 22 amount in terms of a purchase order. So the 134 hasn't been touched yet.
I personally love the 2 goals of helping folks, like a case manager coming out of hospital or sober living environments and then trying to find appropriate placement. It's such a need. We bump into it quite a bit, and at Greenhouse 17, so I love that. And then I love the goal of trying to get our high and medium congregate living barriers, and we have the goal of low. So anything that moves that needle, I think would be terrific.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off that's what I was going to say is, you know, I'm a little biased, obviously, working in an institution, but transitional case management services for people exiting institutions would be great. I know we have a meeting with the Hope Center on Friday in New Vista just to talk about that very thing, that there's people that fall through the gaps. If there was, you know, some more services for those people being discharged and leaving, I think that'd be great.
So, in looking at the list, there were the 5 bullet points of some of the areas that received strong interest, and then a 6th one being street outreach. And then there were, you know, other things to keep in mind. How many of those would we need to cut? Like, or could we put out RFPs for all of them, or like what's?
I mean, we could approach it different ways. We could put out RFPs for all of them. The problem being that I don't think that the amount of funding that we have is going to probably fully fund all of them. So at that point, we could choose to fund the ones that we find to be the best proposals or the most valuable to the system. I also kind of hate the ideal, though, of us and potential subrecipients going through a full RFP process if ultimately it doesn't result in funding. So I think it may be more wise to potentially choose some target areas to where we kind of at least have a sense of not extremely overextending our budget. If we're not prepared to make decisions today, we can continue that conversation. And it's again, just kind of keeping in mind the timeline that if we don't make decisions soon, it's gonna further delay implementation of programs.
How much money do you need to do that ID program?
Yeah, that's my question.
I would say pretty nominal. Holly, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know you had funded it when it was with the county clerk's office. Would you have any sense? I think we gave them money in roughly maybe like $6,000 or so at a time.
Yeah, we gave them $6,000, but I mean, they had a big balance, and gave some of it back even. So I would say if you gave them $3,000, you're good for at least 2 years.
Yeah, because right now the cost would be $10 with the House bill that's currently in process that could be reduced down to $5. But if we're looking at the rate of $6,000 by $10, that would be 600 persons. Obviously, that doesn't include any kind of staffing costs or administrative costs for an agency that would take it on. So say, even if there is a significant amount of those costs, we're still looking at being able to serve a substantial amount of people with a very small amount of money. The other thing is, we wouldn't have to go through an RFP process for a dollar amount like that. We could do a purchase service agreement.
I feel like that's an easy one to support, to go ahead and move forward with, so, because you had already indicated that that was a barrier.
Yeah, we
and that it
continue
would
to
be
get
very
contacts
helpful.
about that, and just in the interim of when it moved from local control to state control, we had no ability to assist. So it's something that I think would be a huge benefit to us in the sense that not only is it something needed for eligibility for certain programs, but it's also going to be a barrier for people accessing mainstream benefits, for them being able to establish employment, and do other things that can help be a pathway out of permanent housing.
So need we make a motion, or could we just tell you that?
I think we probably could do it either individually, or we could do it if we identify the full group of what we want to prioritize. It's kind of just a preference, I guess.
I'm fine with one motion.
I also think on the note of things that it wouldn't require a lot of funds or for the funds to support a lived experience committee, what we had talked about is like possibly small stipends or money for food or something like that. And I think that would be
I regret that I did not include that when my report out. One of the ideals that came from the membership that was not originally something I presented was we under the supplemental NOFO did engage persons with lived experience, but as we've discussed, we really don't have a formal process that does that on an ongoing basis. And so we had just talked about if we used a small amount of funding that could do things like maybe buy food for meetings to bring together a committee of persons with lived experience. Those of us that do this work professionally, we're compensated by our employer. We should be doing something to somehow facilitate bringing those persons with lived experience to the table. That would be another item that could be really nominal funding but have a significant impact. Yes, at this point, if we're comfortable, we could go individually. If we want to talk about the state ID program and someone wanted to make a motion, since we don't seem to be fully at the point where we know all of our priorities.
Well, I guess like on the landlord recruitment, what kind of incentives are you thinking for them?
So I had mentioned landlord recruitment and housing navigation as a potential area to fund. Of course, we have Caitlin with LFUCG as our housing advocate who can do some of that, but her role includes other duties and is not exclusive to the homeless population. So if we had some dedicated funding to that, it would be beneficial to those that we serve. And I believe it was Mountain Comp had suggested that we also look at landlord incentives under certain funding sources like ESGCV. They were able to do incentives like double security deposits, and then programs like the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. The Lexington Housing Authority did sign-on bonuses for landlords. If they signed a lease with a participant, then they would receive some funding that did not have to be returned just for simply participating in the program.
Because I'm not on the advocacy committee, I'm trying to like process all of this information right in this moment. Do you have estimates for like how much for these suggested items make it a viable program? Because if we could talk about how we want to support it, but we would need to support it at an amount that would make it feasible. Is there like some more information that we could talk about today, or that we would just need to have more
I would
later,
need additional time to do that. Unfortunately, I just don't have all of that prepared right now. I think that's a fair point, and I'm glad to do that. I think we would maybe be better served to think about scheduling a special meeting to discuss it so that we're not delayed all the way until the March board meeting.
I would, I think I personally would benefit from more information. So I would be in favor of scheduling a special time to devote to this.
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do we want to make a motion to do a special meeting?
So moved.
Liz has moved.
Second.
Joy has seconded. Is there further discussion on scheduling a special meeting? I assume it'd be between now and the March meeting.
Yeah, I'll try to get that on the calendar here within a couple of weeks. Is there a particular date that you want me to go ahead and target?
No,
If I had
and if it's easier for people, we could do like a Zoom so people can like attend online, because we're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I think Zoom would be a much more feasible way for us to go. I would propose that we try to do it before February when we get into committee meetings. If we wanted to keep our Wednesday schedule, I would want to avoid the 25th, which is our Lex count. So I could try to get some numbers together for the 18th, but I wouldn't have much time to get it to you in advance of the meeting. So
There's not a committee meeting on February 8th, is there?
I was going to say we might want to look at our off week.
I have a meeting for council that I won't be able to not attend. I will have to be there.
Okay.
Because it's a budget meeting, but if that works best for the rest of the group, go ahead, please.
Well, I would like to schedule something where as many of the board members as possible can be there, so we can also look at days outside of a Wednesday afternoon. We don't have to keep the same date and time.
Could we potentially do it on the 1st, before or after the data meeting, where some of us would already be in attendance?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. What does that look like for people?
Let's say, do you want to go ahead and do that first? Because I think that way those who don't need to stay for the meeting could go ahead and leave.
The
So
only time I
then,
can't do is 2 on that day.
would we want to maybe start a little bit early, start at 1 o'clock? That way,
Yeah,
that gives you like a full hour.
How much time do you think we need?
I would think as long as we have some numbers to work off of, I would think an hour would probably be the maximum. So if we started at 1, we typically start data and systems integration at 1:30. So if we had to, we could take a little bit more time and cut into what would typically be the start of that meeting. So that would make it in person though. Is that okay with everybody? 1 p.m.?
I just have another Zoom. I have a Zoom at 2, so I could do in person
Okay.
as long as I was done by 2.
Okay.
Wednesday, February 1st.
So then, Liz, your motion is going to be for February 1st at 1 p.m. in person?
Yes.
And that would be on Loudon Avenue. Or is that here?
Oh, yeah, do we need to check that we can be in that space?
I actually would probably need to ask you, is that okay? All right.
Okay.
So we'll be at the Don Ball Campus Center that day.
Okay, since we've scheduled a special meeting, we have motion second to have one. All those in favor?
Yeah.
It's on the table. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, sounds unanimous today.
All right.
So where is that again going to be?
I'll send out the address.
Okay.
It's the Don Ball Campus Center, right next to the Hope Center.
Oh, okay.
And I will circulate that, and then about a week in advance, I'll try to have the information with some rough estimates for what those budgets would look like.
Thank you, and I don't want to hold up the conversation by having a special meeting, but I feel like I just need more information to make a meaningful decision.
Yeah, I kind of
Agreed.
feel the same
Yeah.
way. I
Thank
feel like I need to know what things are going to cost for to really vote on it.
And so then we would have one other item to return to after the funding discussion, and that is the Lex count methodology. I understand there were no questions. The motion would be coming from committee. We would just need a second.
For a second.
Second.
Thank you, Leah. Is there any discussion about the Lexington methodology that was included in the email packet? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Lexington methodology is approved for the January 25 Lexington. Okay.
And so at this time, I want to see if we could go back to item 5.
Yeah.
Both of our presenters would be here.
Okay, good.
So as they get started, I'm just going to remind everybody that we presently are funding a onboarding curriculum targeted largely at case managers, and that is targeted at the fact that we tend to have high amounts of turnover amongst frontline staff, and oftentimes as we lose staff, we lose knowledge. So this would be something that would help make sure that there is kind of a consistent kind of package of information that's going to frontline staff regardless of where they are employed. It would help them to build skills, and we would also have a mechanism to where we don't lose that knowledge when we lose the person.
There we go.
Well, good afternoon. So my name is Meredith Singleton. I am one of the leadership team at Untold Content, who's been contracted to develop this program and build this work. Chrisley is here with me as well, Chrisley Mannheim. She is going to be the project manager for this project, so she'll be working closely with many of you to help us source and gather the content that we'll need for this program. I just wanted to give us kind of a quick background. So these are the two of us. We'll have an entire creative team as well, and there's another instructional design group who will be supporting this work as part of the contract that we're under. So we'll have an entire team devoted to this. There'll be many hands making this possible, including many of yours. So you'll be hearing from me, you'll be hearing from Chrisley. You might also be hearing from some of the designers and developers who are working on this project as well as we come to you as subject matter experts in the different areas of the content that's going to go into this program. Jeff gave a great background to what we're here to do. So this is a 2-year project that we've been contracted to develop. So we're building, as Jeff said, a comprehensive training program for internal onboarding and also community awareness use. So part of this project will be housed on the LFUCG website so that it's available to external, to community, to get access to resources and information about the work you're doing. We'll also be, as part of this project, building and developing a learning management system that will house this information that will help you track completion, training, assessments, certifications, and so we're building out that component as well. So we'll be sourcing a learning management system, helping to get that under contract and set up and ready for delivery. Why it's going to be such kind of a long, involved process. So we've got kind of 3 major areas that we'll be developing as part of this project. We'll be building a welcome packet for new hires, as Jeff mentioned. We'll be building an orientation program for new case managers who come into the fold, and then an onboarding program to educate community members as well. We were here, gosh, it's been several months ago now, just as Polly was transitioning to talk about how we can leverage that community awareness piece component. So I know you have some materials that as board members you're presented with, and sort of a book that you go through, and we're brainstorming how else can we leverage this tool. Perhaps it's pulling some of that information in as well. So each section of this program will be a combination of different types of materials and resources. So we'll be developing job aids and guides and PDFs and leveraging some of the existing materials that many of you use inside your organization and creating a kind of streamlined approach to those. We'll be developing some video work as well, so we may be coming to you if you're a subject matter expert in a particular service or area and doing some video development on explaining the work that you're doing and how it is part of this onboarding and training program. We'll also be developing some interactive e-learning components, so ways that you can leverage training that becomes a little bit more easier for you to edit and maintain. It can be tracked inside the learning management system. It can be leveraged in how you're doing certifications. So we'll be building some of those components too. So it's going to definitely be a multimodal, multifaceted project in the way that we're going to be leveraging different kinds of materials and resources. And then we mentioned assessments as part of that as well. So we're in the very early stages of this project. So what we're in at the moment and have been working closely with Jeff on is sort of an assessment mode. What do we have? What are we trying to do? What needs to be included in this? Taking a very high level look in this initial phase at what the entire program should look like in the end. We have the goal of wrapping that up at the end of next month. We have, Chris Lee is going to kind of walk through the plan that we have so far and how we've been breaking apart those different components. So we're looking to wrap that up at the end of next month. From there, we'll move into development into different areas. So we'll start with the new hire packet. And so we'll be identifying, based on the content outline in each of those sections, who is the best among you and among the providers to be going to help us build and write and find the content that might already exist for these. So we'll focus on the new hire packet first. That'll be we're estimating about a 4-month process of identifying what exists, what doesn't exist, where do we need to make gaps, fill gaps. Then we'll move into looking at the case manager orientation program. Another 4 months here as we develop and build content. Again, we'll have many hands doing this, so we're hoping to be able to move through these phases in a pretty regular way. Then once we have kind of the content areas developed, we'll be also looking at, in those phases, the community awareness piece. I think we believe there's probably a good amount of that already exists. We just need to pull it into a singular place for it to be experienced. The next big phase will be focusing on the website pages and getting those developed, getting the content loaded, getting users in to make sure it's working, that it has the resources it needs. And then the final phase will be building out that LMS work, that learning management system, getting it built, getting the content inside, doing a quality review check. That will be the last big piece. So we're planning on tackling that over the next 4 years, goodness. We'll be coming and reporting regularly to you as the board on the progress that we're making, giving you insights into some of the materials that we'll be developing, to make sure you have sightline to the work that we'll be doing.
Yes, so as Meredith said, I'm Chrisley Monheim and I'm the project manager. So as we've been working with Jeff, we've kind of divided this project up into 3 buckets. So the first, as Meredith mentioned, is the community awareness, which in the training, we're currently calling the public education training. Then the new hire welcome packet, which in the training would be called Homelessness 101. And again, this is high level today. Orientation for case managers, Homelessness 201. So let's now first dive into the public education curriculum. So the public education module is a community awareness curricula targeted toward community members interested in learning more about LFUCG's mission and vision and the strategic partnership of organizations throughout the community and the services they provide. So this content will be gathered from educational materials created through projects and subject matter experts like you all. This is currently what we have for the public education training. So first, an introduction to Lexington homelessness. Provide overviews of what the COC is, first housing and Lexington homelessness. Then next, what is being done. So identify models, programs used, show how to become involved, and then explain how to respond to issues of homelessness for neighbors and businesses. Next, Lexington Homelessness Fund, so describe how to donate and then explain how the donations are used. And then lastly, in the public education module that we have right now, our neighborhood association, so provide information for neighborhood associations. The second bucket of the training is the Homelessness 101 module. So the Homelessness 101 module will be a welcome packet for new hires of participating organizations with valuable information about the OHPI, the COC, and their organization's role, as well as the COC's mission, vision, and case manager expectations. Packet development will include the design and content development of handouts and e-learning materials. So looking at the Homelessness 101 training. Currently in this training, we have housing sex offenders, so how to house sex offenders, medical respite, so explain what it is, the overview of who is appropriate for medical respite, discuss how to get connected, then providers, explain the different providers and their resources, social workers, how a new social worker in the agency may get involved, and then responding to reporters. So provide an overview of system and processes, protecting client confidentiality and privacy, and then the summary of Lexington data and trends. All right, our third bucket is Homelessness 201. Homelessness 201 will be an orientation program for new case managers, including training on such topics as motivational interviewing, relationship building, and working with interdisciplinary teams, trauma-informed care, process and procedures for assessment and intake, as well as care planning and coordination, and the importance of data and collection entry, completing effective home visits, and working with special populations and needs. In the Homelessness 201 training, we have clients on budgets, management training, executive leadership, emergency shelter training, tenants and landlords, recruiting landlords, understanding different agencies, equal access training, case management tools and concepts, safety planning and confidentiality, SSI and SSDI benefits, and educating parents in school system on applying for SS benefits. So that's kind of the large overview of our training. So next steps is to identify subject matter experts to build modules. So as Meredith said, that's when we are going to be reaching out to you all soon and identifying which people are best for the different trainings. Then identify the information and resources that currently exist and place them within our trainings, and then work through our finalized phased project plan. So thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be working with you and working on this project.
So we wanted to make sure that they kind of gave an update as to where they're at and where they're going, and also make sure that you get a chance to kind of meet the individuals that are going to be working on this, because they're going to be reaching out to some of your agencies to try to get input. We're going to organize some meetings as we work on developing content. So definitely wanted you to have familiarity with them and with the project. Would you guys have any questions for them at this time?
This is maybe just where I'm newer, but for case managers working where?
So it's primarily targeted at like our housing service providers, so people that are going to be within our street outreach teams, our emergency shelter providers, our permanent supportive housing providers. But there's going to be some agencies that I imagine are going to have an interest in some of this content outside of just those that are specifically in the homeless space. That's where I think a lot, especially in the 101 category, for folks that maybe don't operate in this space every day, might be able to go and get some basic resources for how to work with a client that might be in a homeless situation. And then the kind of 201 content would definitely be much more appropriate for somebody that works in this space probably day in and day out.
Gotcha, okay.
So we'd love for you and for those in your agencies to be thinking about what content you have that would exist already that would be placed well inside each of these areas. If there are gaps that you have seen in working with case managers or with others in the community, that we can support developing something that will fill that gap to create that onboarding more seamlessly across what the different agencies are doing. Be thinking about that. That's what we're kind of reaching out to help pull together.
As we move into starting to schedule some additional meetings that would include our partners, I'll obviously have a list of individuals that I want at the table, but if your agency would have an interest in helping participate in the development, definitely feel free to reach out and I can make sure you're included in those communications.
Jeff has our contact information as well, so I'm happy to have more conversations with anyone individually also leading up to those moments too.
Any further input, discussion, questions? Thank you all.
Thank you all for
Thanks for your
having
time.
us.
Thank you very much. So, are we up to encampment?
Yeah. So next, moving into the encampment report, we had at the last board meeting, had a little bit of discussion around some folks wanted some information about locations added to the report. We also are trying to make a consideration that sometimes the encampment sites we have individuals return to. So there was also kind of a sense of trying to make sure that we were protecting the safety of those that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So kind of found a middle ground and giving you some general locations of where these are without getting as detailed as the actual street address. So to review, we had 5 locations that were cleaned since the last board meeting. Location number 1 was actually technically on private property. It was between Shiloh Park and the railroad tracks. It was railroad company property. We worked with them and actually ended up doing the cleanup. It was right near a playground, so there was kind of a sense of urgency for us to try to address that. That report came to us via KU on October 20th. Street Outreach made a couple of attempts over the next week. They did identify one individual who declined services and expressed intent to relocate voluntarily. Follow-up contact, no one was identified at that location. Final notice was posted, and then the camp was cleaned on November 2nd at a cost of $2,400. Location number 2 was at the Clays Mill Road Bridge. OHPI did not receive initial report of that. My understanding is that police directly contacted environmental services about that. The individual that was there voluntarily relocated and actually even helped them to address the litter that was there. That's why you're going to see a very nominal cost of $125 to clean that. Location number 3 was also on private property under state control. We did assist with cleanup of that property. That was another instance where police had directly communicated with code enforcement, so I do not have dates to provide for the initial report or the posting of notices. As it would be private property, we would not be required to post notice as LFUCG. And so there would also unfortunately not be street outreach efforts that were made there. That was cleaned on October 24th at a cost of $2,400. The next 2 locations, 4 and 5, are actually the same location. There was 2 different instances of cleanup. The first was a notice from a partner agency on October 19th. Street outreach got there the same day and attempted to make contact. They were not able to find evidence that it was an active encampment, so we posted right away, and then that was ultimately cleaned at a cost of $2,400. Then there was another instance of individuals returning to that location in November. Multiple attempts were made and no contact was established, and so that was cleaned in December on the 14th at a cost of $1,500. Any questions regarding the encampment report?
Jeff, you've told me before, and I forget the money paid to clean these up is not OHPI budget money.
Correct, it'd be from environmental services, so it's still a cost to LFUCG, but it does not come from the OHPI budget.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm trying to remember / look at SOPs. What? I thought that all public property removals went through, or were supposed to go through OHPI. Is that correct?
Correct. For LFUCG controlled property, so either public property or sometimes we would have a role in cleaning up property that is not technically LFUCG controlled, like railroad property, where we may have a hand in trying to clean that up, or state property.
Okay. But like on location 2, it says OP was never notified and like street outreach was never notified. Is that just
correct? So I got that information when I received the quarterly totals from environmental services. So unfortunately, I was trying to work backwards on that one and just did not have the full information available to me.
so? Okay. So was that? So then that was the situation where like. Where the SOP is like not properly followed or?
Correct. So it should have been something where we were notified, even if there was a compelling reason to move forward immediately, just to, at the very least, make sure that we had a full and complete record of when it was identified, so we could include that in this report, so that we could help to make sure that we agreed with the assessment to move forward immediately, rather than setting a timeline that would be driven around a service plan. So that is unfortunately an instance where the SOP was not followed. You know, thankfully, in having discussions with people, it sounds like ultimately it was an appropriate response, but technically it was a divergence from the SOP.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. There's another one on there. I think it's the same issue. I just want you to know I spoke directly with Chief Weathers about that and made sure that he reiterated with his people what the SOPs are and where to be followed.
So part of it's probably just a communication gap of, it was probably assumed that, you know, if they reported it directly to environmental services or directly to code enforcement, that I would have received that information. I think it's just hard for those individuals to know whether or not I've already been notified, and technically the onus should be on the party that originally discovers the encampment to make sure that we're informed. So it's just, we need to refine our communication process, and Charlie's already taken that step.
Okay, thank you. That's just my question.
Other questions? All right, moving on to the next agenda item then. I've included the updated financials for Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, which would include years rolled on to ARPA funding. Not really a lot of change since the last board meeting. I think maybe just a couple of payments that have went out, and we've started to get some movement on the Transition in Place program from Mountain Comp. They had units come online as of November 1st and are starting to transition households into transitional housing units. Also, just want to take a little bit of time to make sure that everyone is aware of the planning efforts that have gone into the 2023 Lex Count. The registration for volunteers is live, so if you have an interest in helping us, you can go ahead and sign up. That information should be circulating around via email, social media, and it's on both LFUCG's website as well as the Lexington Homelessness website. Like last year, we are asking folks to go ahead and identify their own teams and sign up. That continues to help us mitigate community spread of things like COVID-19 and the flu, which we're seeing high rates of right now. And the count is going to take place on the evening of Wednesday, January 25th. The Rescue Mission has been great in offering to help to get donations and package our distribution of care packages to individuals. So all of that's currently underway. If you have any questions or concerns, we'd be glad to answer that. The primary thing that we need people to do is sign up to help us with the street count. Also kind of wanted to just give people a update on our winter weather response. LFUCG is working kind of internally. We had, of course, the extreme cold snap right before Christmas. We do understand that there's some concerns in the community about things like that we were kind of the entity that people were directed to if they had issues like not having heat, not having utilities, having burst pipes. Obviously, that kind of goes beyond the scope of what we do on a daily basis. So we are working to make sure that there is appropriate planning in place for the next cold snap that we might have, and make sure that there's kind of better messaging around how individuals that have needs can get connected with assistance. The administration did work with my office to make sure that funding was not an issue. We were able to expand capacity of our motel overflow program in efforts to make sure that everyone had a safe place to stay given the extreme temperatures that we experienced. And I am glad to report that unfortunately there was one instance that someone did unfortunately pass away due to the cold, but there were other factors that were involved. It was not an issue where that individual lacked access to shelter. That individual had dementia and wandered away from the Salvation Army. They were quick to alert appropriate parties and push out notification. Unfortunately, she was not located in time. But I want to just commend our street outreach partners and other partners like paramedicine and police. Everyone worked extremely hard over those few days to make sure that shelter was available and that people had meaningful ways to access shelter. So thank you everyone for your efforts. We're going to be working with Community Action Council to process this quarter's invoice and have a better sense of where we're at with our funding, and I should be able to provide that update at the next meeting.
He won't say it, but in addition to thanking all the partners, Jeff worked his tail off for several days, and he really.
He was ill.
I was homesick, and Jeff was supposed to be on vacation, and both of us were pretty much on the phone for 3 days.
It was rough, but
helpful to me.
We got through it. We had 3 emergency shelters on Friday evening that lost power: Catholic Action Center, Hope Center, and Arbor Youth. Thankfully, KU, in collaboration with LFUCG leadership and folks from the state, got those powers restored really quickly because we were sweating it for a minute.
About 20 minutes there where Jeff and I were about to have a heart attack.
Yeah, because there were hundreds of clients that we had a safe solution for that we were potentially going to need another solution for. So thank you everyone, including Charlie, for their efforts. I really appreciate it. Any questions about anything in my report?
Jeff, is there anything further on the House Bill 197? I guess, legislature's in.
So there is a small update on the House bill regarding IDs. There is a 2023 bill number that is available. We're working with Untold Content to go ahead and develop a social media toolkit so that individuals and organizations that would want to show their support of that bill have some tools. Also, there are documents that I've shared via the listserv for organizations that want to show up to show that they support that legislation. Also, I believe we circulated a link if you need help in identifying your legislators so that you can reach out to them directly. I didn't necessarily want to share it publicly, but there is also a tool circulating from the coalition out of Louisville. They're tracking what the kind of climate seems to be amongst legislators, whether they seem to be in favor, and kind of keep track of if any organizations have meetings scheduled with those representatives. If that's of interest, I'm glad to share that directly. I just don't want to, since it's not my tool and there's a note about confidentiality on it. I want to make sure that we're kind of keeping that amongst our provider partners.
Thank you. Let's see, I guess put item 11, next regular meeting scheduled for Wednesday, March 8th here in this room. Other issues in public sharing for issues not on the agenda. Anything?
Don't have an issue, but want to share that we're going to be providing training for, it's designed for laypersons. We have a lot of interest from providers as well on dialectical behavior therapy and trauma-informed care. 2 separate trainings in March, 2 hours each. Everybody's welcome. We take up to 60 in those trainings, and if it's okay, I'll get some information to Jeff to forward out.
We love trainings, especially when they're free.
Is that anything further? Thank you. Thank you very much. At least nobody wanted to talk about UK basketball as an issue.
Not much to talk about.
Please?
Not much to talk
No,
about.
you're right. You're right. All right, we're ready to adjourn? Yeah. Anybody have anything further? Could I get a motion to adjourn? Renee made motion to adjourn. Chris, you want to second it? Thank you very much. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I see nobody opposing. Thank you very much.